welcome to what is now the fourth edition of At the Coalface. My name's Roy Thompson and I head up MHA Carpenter Box Financial Advisors. Today I've got with me Henry Wilson from LGT Vestra. Henry's an investment manager and LGT Vestra are one of the investment providers that we use. Again, the purpose of these videos is just to give you a short update on what's happening in the investment world, and how that's affecting perhaps investment markets. So Henry, I guess over the course of the last couple of weeks since we last filmed a video with you, we got things like GameStop. That's been in the news quite significantly over the course of the last, certainly last week. What's your view on that, and what does that mean for things like the investment markets?
It's a good question. We're sort of all scratching our head as to, what the long-term outcome of something like this will be. In reality, I don't think it'll really impact the Vestra portfolios. It's not the kind of stock that appears highly in the portfolios. We typically invest in companies which are sort of very high quality, high returns on invested capital, things like that. But it is certainly noteworthy because of it's another example of some rather odd things that are ongoing in the market at the moment. There's some rather odd market dynamics. So whether it's been things like Bitcoin going up multiple times over the last few years, or whether it's been this particular incident, there are certainly signs of retail participation in the stock market that are getting to quite sort of concerning levels. Now, I'm not saying that there's going to be a crash or that we're in a bubble, but retail participation has certainly increased. And the more that retail investors are sort of investing into a particular stock, you get this quite irrational behavior. And that can have outcomes and consequences. So it's one that we're keeping an eye on. I think the long-term consequence of this will be that there'll have to be some kind of regulation around these kind of chat rooms and people talking online and bidding up the stock price via these chat rooms. But B, also, you would have noted that Robinhood and some of the other trading platforms significantly wound in the ability for retail investors to trade some of these specific stocks that had gone up so much. That also brings into question their sort of independence. So I think there's certainly something to be done on that front, and we should watch out. The sad thing to note is probably that, a lot of those guys on Reddit or on the chat rooms are probably laughing and thinking it's quite funny, but we might find that, they'll be sitting in a chair facing the regulator in 6 to 12 months' time, either getting a slap on the wrist, a fine, or potentially imprisonment, because it's crucial to the whole workings of the stock market that you don't get this manipulation of prices, and that's essentially what we've had, which is concerted attempt to manipulate the price upwards. And all of us here are working in an environment that we need to understand and have faith in the market dynamics, and that the market pricing mechanism is truthworthy. So there will be something that happens, but I don't think it'll really impact the Vestra portfolios or anyone that invests into those kind of large cap, high quality companies that we typically invest into.
So what you might say is, this is kind of a short-term noise. So this thing, this sort of dynamic might be in the news for a bit over the course of the next couple of weeks, but it's unlikely to have a long-term implication on markets. And if it were to, then regulation would get involved to try and control that in some way, to take out some of the the significant ups and downs that are created by this sort of people intervening in this way. I guess over the course of the last couple of weeks as well, the other thing is the vaccine rollout. There was quite significant disruption last week, and that seemed to give some jitters to, certainly if we look at UK markets over the weekend, maybe that's blown over a little bit, but what's your view on that?
Yeah, so obviously the UK vaccine rollout has been sort of a phenomenal success thus far. I think it was on Sunday they did nearly 600,000 jabs, which is just touching on, or it's not quite 1% of the total population in the UK. So phenomenal success, and I think there's obviously been some glaring eyes from the EU of jealousy, really, and obviously very concerning that how quickly things escalated, and I think what it really goes to show is the very low bar that the relationship has been set at, that they could trigger Article 16 meaning that they were sort of implementing a hard border between Northern Ireland and the UK. And they've shown that it's an incredibly low bar to trigger that, and the relations are still quite fraught following the Brexit agreement. But from our perspective, it's now been resolved, and we can move on. It does look like it's been resolved, and that we'll get the 3.5 million doses that we were expecting. And yeah, again, a little bit like the first example that we were discussing with GameStop, we expect this to blow over now, and that we will continue to kind of receive doses unimpeded. But it does certainly bring to fore the whole new UK-EU relationship, and that they see us very much as a competitor now, and not so much as a collaborator or a colleague. And so that it does demonstrate that there's work to be done from the politicians. And there's also work to be done on the EU trade agreement. Obviously we didn't cover, we got goods, but we didn't cover services within the agreement, particularly financial services. For the UK, that accounts for around 10% of GDP. So that will be an area that we really need to cover later on in the year, to ensure that we can continue to sell financial products into the EU and services, of course. So just to round that up, much ado about nothing, lots of panic. We think it's all resolved now, but certainly does raise some concerns about the overall UK-EU sort of relationship going forward.
Which you can imagine will be fraught, certainly for, in the short term. So yeah. I guess these two things serve, in my mind at least, to highlight that, we might start with a background where investment markets look, it doesn't look like a bad place to have money just at the moment, with low interest rates and lots of money in the system. But it serves to remind us that it's very, very sensitive to risks that can come along that we can't foresee. So certainly if we look at things from a short-term basis, we're going to continue to see some quite significant volatility, or the potential for volatility. But the long-term position, these events don't necessarily change our view of where we are with the long-term position.
Absolutely right. We think that sort of, if you look at equity markets, there's still some way to go. We think they're pretty attractive for the reasons that you mentioned earlier. We also have to sort of be cognizant that some of those tail risks that we spoke about last year, such as the political risks in the US and the UK and Europe, and then also the risks of the vaccine rollout, we didn't really know whether it'd be successful or not. Well, a lot of those risks have dissipated, which means that we can now look forward with a certain level of certainty around these things. However, we do, as you mentioned, we expect that volatility will be rife, and that that's what really brings us to the fore as active managers. And also that's where diversification comes to the fore. We've created portfolios that have a blend of different asset classes. So when the equities aren't quite working, we have a bit of gold. When the gold isn't quite working, we have some US treasuries or some gilts. When that's not working, we have some absolute return, and we have some cash. So it's all about finding assets that can work in conjunction with one another to smooth out that overall return profile of the portfolio, so that it goes up smoothly, or certainly less in a manner that's less volatile than the overall market. We did that last year, and we will expect to be able to do that this year as well.
That's brilliant. Henry, thank you so much for your time. Just a short update on the markets, and we'll be speaking to LGT Vestra again in 2 weeks' time. Thanks very much.
Perfect. Thanks.